What I'm about to show you wasn't meant to be shared. In a moment, I'm going to be going over a webinar full course for beginners that is going to take you through step by step exactly how you can make a killer webinar that can absolutely blow up your business and make you a ton of money. And I'm going to be sharing this as someone who has used webinars to get to 7 figures of revenue per year. And what I'm about to reveal is probably going to make a lot of people mad because it's literally going to be more valuable than most $10,000 coaching programs out there. And it's all completely free. I'm going to be showing you how to make webinars. I'm going to be giving you the best examples of some of the best webinar builders out there. And then I'm going to show you step by step exactly how we made our own high performing webinar. I'm going to be pulling the curtains back and showing you behind the scenes. And I don't have some type of webinar coaching program or webinar course or anything like that to sell you. Now, you're probably thinking right now, Shane, why are you sharing this? Well, there's 3 reasons. First, I remember exactly how it feels to work your ass off for a fraction of what you're worth. Just a few years ago, I was working a normal 9-to-5 job as a pharmacist and I was drowning in student loan debt. And I worked as a pharmacist during the pandemic and I absolutely hated my job as well. So I wanted to escape it. And just a few years later, I built a business that makes 6 figures a month and webinars are a massive part of that. And I've seen what's happening in the economy, right? People are suffering right now. The middle class is getting absolutely crushed. And I want to help other people do the exact same thing that I did. So my goal isn't to get the most subscribers or make the most money. My goal is literally just to provide the most value to the market on YouTube. And so I've gone over some of the best webinar courses, all the best webinar gurus out there, and I've even consulted with some of the top people in the industry. Plus, I've built my own webinars that have done extremely well. And I'm going to be revealing all the secrets, showing you everything, showing you the behind the scenes, and I'm also going to provide all the templates, the step-by-step guides, and the supplementary resources, which you can check out down in the description and the pinned comment below. And I'm doing it all completely free because I want to provide the most value to the market this year. That's my goal. Now, the second reason is that the online space is either filled with people who don't know what they're talking about or people who do know what they're talking about, but they needlessly overcomplicate things because they want to make it seem like their system is the best and their fancy mechanism works better than everyone else's. When in reality, there's some fundamentals that work no matter what, and those are the things you should be focusing on. And I'm going to be focusing on those in this video. With that being said, I also have a lot of tips and tricks of the trade that most people don't know about that definitely help to save time, effort, and money here and there as well and get you results faster. So it's really time that someone told the truth about what actually works, not what sells courses to desperate beginners. And then number 3, I know that once I give you a massive amount of value, 1 year, maybe 3 years, even 5 years down the line, because I'm in this for the long game. I'm playing this for my whole life, right? I want to be in this industry for a very long time. So 1 year, 3 years, even 5 years down the line, once you're very successful, you're likely going to want to work with me again. I feel this same way about Sam Ovens. I really loved his earlier work, his courses like Consulting Accelerator. And now that he's launched School and some other products like that, I basically buy whatever he launches because I owe him so much gratitude. And I feel indebted to him because his stuff was so good when I needed it. And so I'm paying that forward. And so those are my reasons for doing this. So with that being said, if you appreciate my team and I putting a massive amount of effort into making this course, go ahead and let us know by gently tapping that like button. And now let's jump into it. Hey guys, in the editing process here, and I forgot to mention that you can check Go High Level out down in the description and the pinned comment below. It's basically an all-in-one software that any business owner or marketer can use. And instead of having like 7 different softwares, they just have everything in one. And they all interconnect with each other and you can log in to get really good customer support if you ever need it just by logging into a Zoom call that's always playing 24/7. So yeah, phenomenal product. So many people use it. I highly recommend it if you're a beginner because you don't need to be zapping like 7 different pieces of software together unless you have like a full-time IT guy. But yeah, check it out in the description and the pinned comment below. Now back to the video. All right, so first we're gonna get clear on what you're about to learn because unlike 99% of the trainings out there, this isn't some vague BS that leaves you more confused than when you started. I'm gonna spell out exactly what you're going to walk away with today. No fluff, no filler, just the exact system that you need to implement to start closing high ticket sales like clockwork. So here's a breakdown of everything we're going to cover. So first, the psychology behind why webinars absolutely demolish every other selling method for high ticket offers, if done correctly. And not just that they work, but why they work so that you can leverage these psychological triggers. Second, the exact framework that I use that consistently converts at a higher rate while other people are celebrating a measly 2%. Third, the specific techniques to keep high value prospects glued to their screens, not the usual provide value garbage advice, price, but actual engagement tactics that prevent drop-offs. Fourth, my step-by-step system for attracting qualified leads who are ready to buy, not tire kickers who waste your time. And fifth, the specific strategies that help me close over $1 million in high-ticket sales. And then finally, the complete roadmap for scaling this to 7 figures and beyond. All right, so now let's talk about the power of webinars for selling high-ticket offers. And the simple truth is that if you're selling anything over $3,000 and you're not using webinars, you're basically setting a pile of cash on fire. Now, not to say that you can't do this for lower ticket offers, you absolutely can, and it absolutely crushes. But while everyone else is chasing the latest marketing fad or trying to growth hack their way to success, smart operators understand that webinars are the ultimate weapon for selling premium products. So let me tell you this, most businesses are leaving thousands or even millions of dollars on the table because they don't know how to leverage webinars properly. They're relying on sales calls that take forever, complicated funnel systems that cost a fortune to build, or even worse, they're trying to sell high-ticket offers through social media posts like a bunch of clueless amateurs. Some common mistakes that I see is people that rely on sales calls, right? So they send somebody directly to a sales call who is not even close to being ready to buy. So they might be mildly familiar with whatever you're selling, but they aren't even close to being educated or nurtured enough to actually buy your product. So you're basically wasting your time sending them to a sales call. Or complicated funnel systems that cost a fortune to build. Or a bunch of people try to sell high-ticket offers through social media posts and they just don't have any luck. And I've seen businesses go from zero to over $80,000 a month with webinars. And I've also seen businesses that were stuck at around $30,000 to $50,000 a month, absolutely crushing it with $300,000 months just by nailing their webinar strategy. Because chances are you have a bunch of leads that are not educated or nurtured enough to actually buy from you right now. And the easiest way to educate and nurture those leads to the point where they feel comfortable with you and they will buy from you is by using a webinar. And honestly, webinars are your secret weapon for scaling fast. And these aren't your boring corporate presentations where everyone's checking their phone the whole time. I'm talking about a strategic selling system that lets you reach thousands of high-paying clients with just a laptop and an internet connection. And while other businesses are chasing leads one by one or spending a fortune on complicated marketing systems, you're going to be closing deals at scale with a presentation that does the heavy lifting for you. And the crazy thing is, webinars sort of went out of style during the pandemic because they were so common, right? Because so many people were doing them during the pandemic and before the pandemic because everyone was home and they didn't really have anything else to do, so they were watching webinars, and so they became much less effective. But the pendulum has now swung back and webinars are absolutely crushing it right now. And the competition still hasn't figured this out, right? They're still relying on outdated sales tactics that may have worked 10 or 15 years ago, but they don't work now. But it's not just about showing up and delivering a presentation. There's a specific approach that you need to take. And here's where most people get webinars completely wrong. They think it's just about providing value and then pitching at the end. And that is absolute garbage. What you're actually doing is educating, building trust, and positioning yourself as the undisputed expert in your field or your niche. So you're not just selling here, you're creating an environment where buying your offer is the most logical next step. And most webinars fail because they're either glorified sales pitches that provide zero value, or they're training sessions that never actually ask for the sale. The sweet spot is creating such massive perceived value that your offer feels like a bargain, right? Even if it's $10,000 or more. And when you nail this approach, the results are absolutely mind-blowing. So let me hit you with some numbers that will blow your mind. I've personally seen webinars consistently achieve 56% conversion rates on live events. No, that's not a typo. 56%. While most marketers are celebrating a 1% to 2% conversion rate on their funnels, and they think that's normal. While elite webinar operators are closing more than half their attendees into paying clients. And no, I'm not talking about selling some cheap $97 course. I'm talking about premium offers, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, even $25,000 packages. And this isn't some theory, it's not guru BS. These are actual results from actual businesses using the exact framework that I'm about to give you. Now let's talk about why you should forget all that low ticket garbage and focus exclusively on high ticket offers. Right, most people think selling low ticket is easier. It's easier to sell someone, $7 or $97 than it is to sell somebody $5,000. So it's an easier sell, and most people don't think about it as much. That is complete BS. It's actually harder to sell low ticket at scale. You need more traffic, more volume, and you're gonna have much higher overhead. High ticket, on the other hand, is the fast track to profitability, and let me show you why. 99% of businesses get it completely wrong. They're struggling to sell thousands of $47 products when they could be selling a handful of premium offers for 100 times the profit. So let's break it down in a way that even the most clueless marketer can understand. On the left, we have high ticket offers, fewer transactions, higher profit margin, less customer service headaches, and actual life-changing results for your clients. On the right, we have low ticket offers, a metric ton of transactions, razor thin margins, endless customer service nightmares, and surface level results for your customers. Which would you rather have? Because I'll take the left side every single time. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying you shouldn't sell low ticket offers. It just shouldn't be the primary thing that you sell. Low ticket offers are great to get people in the door, to get them ready to buy your high ticket product or service. It's kind of like a sample platter, right? You're giving them a sample of the food or a sample of the ice cream, and if they like it, they'll buy the full thing. But just about everyone out there should be selling high ticket products. And let me make this even clearer with some specific numbers. So when it comes to profitability, selling a $1,000 product to 10 people is often easier and more profitable than selling a $10 product to 1,000 people. That's $10,000 either way, but the difference in effort is astronomical. Think about it. With low ticket approach, you need 100 times more customers, 100 times more support issues, and 100 times more logistical headaches. And most businesses are killing themselves trying to make the math work on low ticket offers when they could be making 10 times the profit with 1/10 the effort by focusing on a high ticket. And it's not just about the profit margin. There's another key advantage to the high ticket approach: efficiency. With high ticket offers, you need fewer sales to reach your revenue goals. This means you can focus more on delivering exceptional value and less on constantly chasing new leads. So let's say your goal is 100K per month. With a $100 product, you need 1,000 sales. With a $1,000 product, you need 100 sales. And with a $10,000 product, you need just 10 sales. Which sounds more achievable, 10 sales or 1,000 sales? Obviously 10. And while everyone else is running around like headless chickens trying to get thousands and thousands of sales, you can focusing on delivering an amazing experience to a handful of premium clients. But there's yet another advantage to the high ticket approach that most people completely overlook: the quality of the clients. This is something that those cheap ass course sellers never tell you. High ticket clients often lead to better long-term relationships, more referrals, and a stronger reputation in your industry. Just about everyone who gets canceled is selling low or medium ticket products. And you almost never hear people getting canceled when they're selling coaching programs. There's a reason for that, because you know what low ticket clients lead to? Refund requests, support tickets, and 1-star reviews because they didn't get instant results. But when someone invests 5K, 10K, or more with you, they're committed, and they're much more likely to get results. They show up, they do the work, they get results, and then they tell everyone about it. Compare that to someone who impulse bought your $47 product and never even logged in. Which business model sounds more sustainable? Now let me show you a visual that makes this ridiculously obvious. Here's a graphic that makes it painfully obvious which model is superior. On the left, higher profitability with fewer sales efforts. A $1,000 product is actually lighter on your business than a $10 product. On the right, lower profitability with more sales efforts. A $10 product requires massive infrastructure and constant customer acquisition, yet 90% of businesses are still choosing the right side because they're afraid to charge what they're worth. They're afraid to sell high ticket offers because they don't know how to properly present their value. Okay, now that we've established the value of selling high ticket, let's move on to crafting your webinar. But I highly recommend you sell at least medium ticket, if not high ticket. So let's begin with how we started our webinar, because it didn't start from scratch at all. We followed a framework that allows us to make our webinars become incredibly effective. This is what we call the Peter framework, and this works insanely well in any niche when it comes to creating your webinar. Now, what does Peter stand for? Proof of concept, exploration of ideas, theory, evaluate, and retry. Now, you might ask, what the heck is this all about? Basically, this is a framework that helps you make incredible webinars consistently without having to guess or start from scratch. And to further explain this one, I'm gonna walk you through it with concrete examples. Let's begin with proof of concept. And when it comes to proof of concept, you have to first identify your goal. So this is where you clearly state what you want to achieve with your webinar. And in my case, my goal was to host a high-performing webinar, but that's not enough. I need to know where to get high-value attendees and how to attract them. So I moved forward in finding successful models. And that's the next step. In the case of crafting a high-performing webinar, I looked for successful creators who are hosting webinars. And this is where I can get ideas from them in terms of how they attract high-value registrations, their landing pages, and the structure of their webinar itself. And I didn't just find one, I found 5 different creators, and they were all either in my niche or in adjacent niches. And I'll explain what adjacent niches are here in a moment. And you need to be sure that these creators are actually making money from their webinars. So just as an example, I'm in the remote jobs or make money online niche, and some adjacent niches might include digital nomads, high-income professions, or investment communities. Because people that are interested in getting a remote job or making money online are probably also interested in those other things. That's what an adjacent niche is. So in my case, I found Felix, who's been conducting successful webinars in his niche. Now, he's actually one of my clients, and I helped him to grow his YouTube channel from 7 figures a year to 8 figures a year. And we don't have the exact same niche. He teaches people how to invest and do options trading. However, the same types of people that would be interested in that would likely also be interested in making money online. Now, I found him and I found 4 other people that were similar to him, and I made sure to confirm that they were all making money. So in the case of Felix, I knew he was making money because he was one of my clients, and he gave me permission to model my webinar based off of his. And so this is where you would go out and find 5 successful webinars. And for the sake of time, we're going to be using Felix as our successful model since his webinars are indeed successful. Now, the goal here is for you to see how the Peter framework is being done. You don't want any guesswork, right? You don't want to guess on how to make a successful webinar. You don't even want to take a course and then try to make a successful webinar. What you should do, and this is all about the P part of the Peter principle, is establish proof of concept. Now, how do you establish proof of concept? You find people that are already crushing it in either your niche or an adjacent niche, right? You're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. That would take a massive amount of time, effort, and money. You find people out there that you know are crushing it right now in your niche or an adjacent niche, and then you model your webinar based on theirs. So Felix, for instance, operates in the space of trading education, and he provides actual trading strategies and investment knowledge through his GOAT Academy platform. And now that I have a successful model, I analyze what they're doing. So at this point, you would want to sign up for the person's webinar, and then you would want to attend their webinar and record it. And you can record their webinar using a free software like OBS. And a lot of the time, they'll offer their webinar as a replay anyways. But you wouldn't just watch the webinar. You would also document how they pitch the webinar in their content or in their ads. So you'd record that as well. And you'd document their link. You'd take a screenshot of it. Then you would document their landing page. So you'd take a screenshot or a video of that as well. And then you'd screenshot all of the email messages and the text messages that they send you to make sure that you show up for the webinar and exactly when those messages were sent. And by the way, guys, I have links to these exact slides that I'm talking about that are from my webinar that's converted, and you can check those out in the description and the pinned comment below. It's going to be in the 4 resources. And I actually have links to multiple different webinars that kind of shows the progression. Now, guys, I actually have a Miro board that shows all of the different steps of my funnel and my landing page, which is very simple, but it's also very good to see so you can see just how simple it is. Plus, I'll have all of the emails that I send as well. So for lead magnets, for instance, you'll often notice that successful landing pages are simple, direct, and they avoid overcomplicating it with testimonials or long copy. And Felix landing page is dead simple. It has its title or the objective of the webinar, a sign-up form, and then him as the speaker or expert in the field. And this is what it looks like. It's literally this dead simple. Now, if you tried to guess what a good landing page would look like, especially if you followed what all the gurus tell you, you'd probably think, oh, I have to have a bunch of testimonials and a bunch of videos and tons of copy and lots of pictures. And I'd have to make the landing page look super pretty and intricate. Nope, dead simple landing pages are what works. And you know this because you have proof of concept from someone who's actually doing it. So after a successful sign up, it led me to a thank you page. And here's what that looks like. And there's a pop-up after about 5 seconds on the thank you page. So after they sign up to a webinar, they can also enroll for a completely free course as well, right? And it's a free 10-part mini options course. And after signing up, it redirected me to this page, which is on Teachable. So not only is a person signing up for a webinar where they're going to show up and Felix is going to teach them things live, but they also have access to a free mini course. And while you're doing this, by the way, try to think like the psychology behind why these people are doing what they're doing. Because Felix obviously knows what he's doing. He's making 8 figures a year with this. So there are reasons why he's doing these things. So when I click the go to free course curriculum, there was a lot of free modules that anyone can take and learn from. And it also has templates of a page where anyone can showcase their course, coaching, or whatever they offer. And each section has different purposes. Now, what I was showing you are the practices of a successful model. And this is something that you can reproduce, right? This is something that you know is working right now. And so you can model your webinar and your strategy after what they're doing. So model your webinars after proven success. And here's another practice that I noticed. It's not just the webinar pages, it's also the emails. For instance, I received an email confirming my webinar sign up. They also sent a 24-hour reminder, a 12-hour reminder, a 1-hour reminder, and a 30-minute reminder in my email. These are all things you can record, and you can model your emails that you send out to people off of these. And you can send them at the exact same time frames that they use as well. So instead of guessing when the best time to send the webinar reminder emails are, you just know because you modeled success. So next was watching the actual webinar. I noticed that he has a flow or order that he follows in his webinar. So what I did, and which you can do also, is I recorded his webinar and extracted the transcript, and then I asked Claude to identify the pattern or structure of the webinar. Another thing I noticed is he didn't call it a webinar, he called it a masterclass, even though it's essentially the same thing. So this is something you can do as well. In your marketing, don't refer to it as a webinar, refer to it as a masterclass or a mini workshop or whatever people that are in your niche or adjacent niches are referring to it as. And based on Felix's masterclass, here's the structural pattern that he uses throughout his presentation. 1, results first hook. He begins by showcasing impressive outcomes like 439% and 350% returns to immediately capture attention and establish credibility. 2, problem, agitation, solution. He identifies the problem, people losing money in the markets, agitates it, showing how holding too long can wipe out gains, and then presents his 3-step system as the solution. 3, the simple system presentation. He breaks down complex trading topics into 3 straightforward rules that anyone can understand, and he uses visual aids and real examples. So this is a part where so many people mess up when you try to figure out how to do webinars on their own. They'll watch a successful webinar and they'll think, oh, I could do way better than that. And then they make a super complicated webinar, right? Where they break down super complex topics and they think that they're gonna impress people by doing that. That is a terrible mistake. And what you wanna do instead is take those complex topics and make them as simple as possible. And that's exactly what Felix does in his webinar. Step 4 is authority building. So throughout the webinar, he establishes credentials. For instance, he comes from an investment banker background and he positions himself as someone who learned from elite Wall Street insiders. And then 5 is an aspirational framing. He connects trading success to lifestyle freedom rather than just money, emphasizing the ability to choose what you do with your time. And then 6 is strategic teaching. He provides genuine value, explaining breakout patterns, moving averages, and even the exit strategy while holding back the crucial piece that requires his program. And then he uses a 2-path close. He presents 2 options: struggle alone or succeed with mentorship, followed by a high-ticket offer with limited availability, only 30 spots, to create urgency and scarcity. Now, this framework is designed to build both desire and trust while positioning his high-priced mentorship as the only logical choice for serious students. Now, at the end of his webinar, he starts to pitch his solution, and he has a medium ticket offer, which is here. This is $1,595 or $354 a month. And then he has a higher ticket offer, which is here. And this is a coaching program or mentorship. And of course, you have to sign up for a call to see exactly how much it is. And it ranges anywhere from $4,000 to $14,000. And that's going to give you access to different tiers or different levels of mentorship. Now, if the payment has not been completed yet, there's a follow-up email that will also be sent. And here's what that looks like. So that's another thing that you can take note of. If someone didn't buy, what types of emails and what types of texts are they sending to those people? And by the way, we did the same exact thing with texts as well. I'm just showing you emails as an example. Their current email structure looks like this: email registration, live webinar, thank you page, free course, optional upsell on the free course, and optional upsell after the webinar, and then mentorship where they have to get people on a phone call. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, damn, I need to hire a developer or learn some complicated software to create pages like this. Well, that is what most people think, and it's completely wrong. The crazy thing is, you can make a landing page exactly like this in about 10 minutes with something like Go High Level. And I'm not even kidding. Go High Level has all of these templates built in. You just pick one, swap out the text, add your own images, and boom, you've got a professional landing page that converts like crazy. And you should definitely model that landing page based on the winners that you found. And look, when I first started running webinars, I wasted thousands on custom development and zapping things together using Zapier. But what the elite operators understand is it's not about fancy tech or super fancy landing pages. It's about having the right message on a clean professional page that loads fast and captures leads effectively. And Go High Level gives you everything you need for your entire webinar funnel. Not just a landing page, but your entire follow-up sequence too. Email automation, SMS or text reminders, calendar booking for your high-ticket calls, all in one platform. So while everyone else is cobbling together 5 to 6 different tools and hoping that they integrate properly, you can run your entire webinar funnel from a single dashboard. And what I love about Go High Level for webinars specifically is the built-in countdown timers, one-click registration, and automatic reminder sequences. So remember those email reminders that I showed you earlier in Felix's funnel? The 24-hour reminder, the 12-hour reminder, and the 1 hour reminder? Well, you can set all of that up with a few clicks and go high level. So a few years ago, you would have to literally use like 5 or 6 different pieces of software. You'd probably have to have like a full-time IT person on your staff because they would use Zapier to connect all the different pieces of software, and it would cost you thousands of dollars to do this. Now you can use Go High Level and it costs like $97. It's unbelievably cheap and you have everything in one platform. So Go High Level and all of the other software that I recommend for doing webinars is going to be down in the description and the pinned comment below. And they have a free trial so you can test it out before spending a dime. All right, let's move on to the next part, which is exploration of ideas. So this is the E in the Peter framework. So let's go back to our case. I already have Felix as my successful model, and I'm already aware about his best practices and the structure of his webinar, as well as his text messages, his emails, etc. Now, the next thing I needed to do was adapt it to my niche. So I had to implement those successful strategies into my specific niche. Now, if you don't have content yourself, you can also start by modeling your content after what's working in other niches. And while most strategies that work in one niche are often successful in others, there may be some niche-specific details that need adjustment. So in my case, I had to make small niche-specific changes when necessary. So I use AI tools like Claude and Poppy AI to help adapt proven content to my niche and brand voice. Now, at the same time, if you find certain elements of content that you need to change for your niche, make sure to explain why. For example, if a piece of content didn't get many views but still converted those who saw it into buyers, that can be a valid reason to make small changes. So you have to be intentional about the changes that you want to make. It has to be reasonable as well, or you might end up changing it for the worse. So the more you understand your niche and the better you are at doing this, the more changes you can make. But if you aren't good at doing this, right, you're not good at making webinars and you don't understand your niche very well, I would pretty much just rely on an AI tool to make all the changes for you. So basically just tell it what your niche is all about, give it the transcript of the really good webinar, and then tell AI to use that webinar as a model, as inspiration to make your own webinar, which is in a different niche. So next is the T part of the Peter framework, which is theory. So here you have to make and explain your theory on why you think the webinar will work in your niche. You also have to provide a logical explanation in a sentence or two. So an example theory would be, I reviewed 5 top creators that host webinars with large personal brands who make over $100,000 a month. 4 out of 5 users used a very simple lead magnet landing page that only asked for an email or a first name with no lengthy copy. Therefore, I believe that a minimalist landing page focusing on the lead magnet's title will yield higher signups for our email list. And of course, we've seen that this theory holds true in Felix's case. He has a very minimalist landing page. So once you've established your theory, you need to test it out. So use tools like Claude to assist in developing your content or webinar further. And this is especially helpful if you're looking for quick iterations or you need to adjust it to fit your niche or brand philosophy. So if you're closely following a proven content model, the next step is less critical. However, if you plan to diverge significantly from the original, explaining why you have made those changes and how they align with your niche is absolutely essential. Example, you might add more detailed information to a lead magnet landing page if your audience tends to seek more in-depth data before signing up. For instance, if your audience wants testimonials, statistics, and other important information seen on the landing page. So a clear example of this is seen on the following landing pages. Charlie Morgan, for example, he has 3 things: a headline, a sign-up form, and social proof. So he goes a little bit further than what Felix does, and he does provide social proof. And comparing it to Felix's, this landing page has more information about the webinar and the person hosting it, but it's still effective, very likely because Charlie Morgan is targeting a B2B audience, whereas Felix is targeting a B2C audience. Charlie Morgan is trying to attract business owners, whereas Felix is trying to attract 9-to-5ers that want to achieve financial freedom. But still notice here that there's no 20-minute video, no endless paragraphs of text, and no complicated design elements that distract from the core offer. But this is what's actually working in the real world, while the fancy, overcomplicated pages are failing miserably. And the data doesn't lie. There's a reason why all of the successful people have simple landing pages. So at this point, we tested out our first theory, Felix, and we tried adding testimonials and statistics to our lead magnet landing page and our own landing page for live training. Notice how simple it is. There's a clear headline that speaks directly to the prospect's desired outcome. There's a simple form. There's some basic social proof. That's it. No fluff, no filler, no unnecessary complexity, no endless scrolling page where you can scroll down like 15, 20, 30 pages. And then we tested it. Now, it's also important to always provide a rationale for any modification that you think is necessary. And after testing the theory, the next thing you want to do is evaluate. That is the second E part of the Peter framework. So how do we evaluate? Well, there should be a definite parameter of what success looks like for your experiment. You have to establish clear and measurable goals. And these goals should be directly linked to the purpose of the content. An example of this is for a lead magnet landing page, right? You want 10% of visitors to sign up to show up to your webinar. For an email campaign, your goal might be the click-through rate, right? You want 5% of recipients to click the call to action or the link. So make sure you have a measurable goal and you're recording the proper data and you're testing it so that it can be observed. And after launching the content, monitor its performance over the defined period. And then compare the actual results against the goals that you set earlier to see if your theory was correct. So let's take into account the landing page that we made. It pulled 8,961 signups, not because it's fancy or unique or creative, but because it follows the Peter framework. And while everyone else is trying to be clever or original with their landing pages, we're busy collecting leads and making sales. And now we move on to the last point on the framework, which is retry. So of course you don't have to do this if you have a successful landing page or a successful webinar, but based on the test, you want to see what happens. And if you were right, just keep doing more of the same thing and stop wasting your time doing other things that don't work. However, if you were wrong, you want to start the process over and try new things. So you'd want to analyze the results. After evaluating your content's performance, look at the results closely. And if the content met your predefined success criteria, then you can move forward confidently. And if the content performs well and hits your goals, keep producing similar content and avoid wasting time on methods that aren't as effective. So basically just keep doing the same webinar if it's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, if it's not working, adjust if necessary. If your content didn't meet your goals, it's time to adjust. So you want to formulate a theory explaining why it didn't work as expected. For instance, the lead magnet's headline might not have been compelling enough to get signups, or the call to action could have been unclear, or the offer didn't resonate with the audience. And then you decide if it's worth retrying. Based on a new theory and the available data, assess if it's worth making another attempt. And generally speaking, the things that you want to change are the things that are going to be the most important, for instance, the headline on a landing page, or the things that are easiest to tweak. And if you believe there's potential, go ahead and tweak your content for another test, right? So basically just tinker with the original theory. And this could be improving the headline, modifying the call to action, or changing the design elements. For example, if you made a super long landing page that has lots of text and people can scroll forever, and you're simply just trying to get people to sign up for a webinar, there's a good chance that that's the reason why they aren't signing up. So for a landing page, you might try A/B testing a new headline or simplifying the design further. And for an email, you could try a more direct subject line or a clearer call to action. And then just repeat the process, right? Test it again. Once you've made the necessary adjustments, launch the content again, track the new data, and then compare the results with your initial test to see if the changes improve performance. So this is basically just tinkering, right? You're just messing around with little things and seeing if it improves the performance. And then you just keep refining your content until you find a strategy that consistently works. And keep in mind that even if something works, it's important to stay open to further optimization through continuous testing. So for instance, on Go High Level, you can split test different landing pages. So you could send 100 people to one landing page and 100 people to a different landing page. And the only difference is the headline, and see which one converts better. So I realize the Peter framework might be a little confusing, so just a quick recap on exactly how we use this. So we started with proof of concept. We wanted to host a great webinar, so we looked at what Felix was doing, and it worked. We saw his email reminders too, 24 hours before, 12 hours before, 1 hour before, 30 minutes before, etc. And then we watched and recorded Felix's webinar. He hooked people right away by showing his big results. He talked about a problem, made you feel it, then offered his solution. And he taught real stuff, but held back just enough to make his offer valuable. Pretty clever. Then for exploration of ideas, we took what worked for Felix and tweaked it for our audience. We didn't try to be super original, we just made small changes where needed. Then we created our theory about why these things would work for us. Like those landing pages that we looked at, some were super simple, others had some testimonials, but both worked because they followed proven patterns of keeping the landing page very simple and not being too long. Then we got to the evaluate stage and we basically set clear goals. Now our landing page got 8,961 signups, not because it was fancy, but because it followed what works. Whereas most people that would just try to do this off the top of their head, they think that a super fancy landing page that has lots of testimonials and it's super long and, tons of copy would do better. Well, it doesn't. That might work for other offers if you're selling a course or if you're selling a high ticket product, but for getting somebody to sign up to a webinar, it doesn't work. And then finally, with the retry phase, we learn to keep doing what works and fix what doesn't. If something's working, do more of it. If it's not, make small changes, tinker with it, and then try again. And the cool thing is you don't have to guess anymore. While everyone else is making complicated landing pages with tons of text and videos, we're keeping it simple because that's what actually works. And trust me, if complicated worked, then we would do complicated. But the whole point is that we just do what works. We do what we know works because we found a proof of concept. So the Peter framework doesn't just work for webinars, it really works for any type of content that you're making. And the most important part of the Peter framework is proof of concept. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to be the first person to hack through the bamboo forest hoping that there's gold on the other side. Be the second person after the first person has already found gold and you see them walking out with a handful of it. But one thing I should note here, and I talked about this earlier, is steal like an artist. Steal a little bit from a bunch of different people. Don't just steal everything from one person. And use other people's proof of concept as inspiration and model yours after theirs, but don't copy it word for word. All right, now let's move on to the next part. So guys, like this is what all the top people in the industry do. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not trying to guess what works. There's a little bit of guesswork. There's always going to be a little bit of tinkering here and there, but they are following proven models, right? Stop trying to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to learn how to like melt rubber and weld steel and put everything together and like learn how to pump air into the rubber, right? You don't have to learn all of that. That would be a massive headache if you had to do that. Instead, just figure out what's working right now in your niche or niches that are similar to yours, where a similar audience is watching that content, and then just model what works, okay? This is what none of the courses and the coaching and the gurus will tell you, and this is what they all do. They literally all just model what works. And they make tiny little changes here and there. And then maybe once they're extremely skilled, once they're very, very good at what they do, then they can try to innovate and do different things. But that usually comes like 5 to 10 years down the line when you're literally in the top like 99.9th percentile, right? I innovate on YouTube, but that's because I've been doing YouTube for like 10 years now. When I first started doing YouTube, I was not trying to innovate. I was just following what actually works. And I would steal one thing from like 100 different channels and then I made something completely new. Okay, so I'm gonna stop ranting on that part, but it's unbelievably important. And this isn't just about webinars, this is about anything that you do. Follow the Peter framework. Now, another thing that I talked about before, I do think that high ticket works the best with webinars, especially live webinars. But with that being said, you can always do medium ticket or low ticket, but live webinars specifically are extremely good for engaging with your audience. They feel like they're talking to you, right? Because you're having a two-way conversation when you do a live webinar. They can message you, they can type to you. Sometimes you can even have them, pop up on the webinar and, actually ask you questions. So you're literally having a conversation with them. And that's much more engaging than just making content. And so a massive problem that so many people have is they get a lot of leads, but they're not good leads, right? They're not people that are engaged with you. They're not people that trust you. They're not people that have been educated about what you have to offer. And a webinar is an amazing way to bridge that gap so that when they do get on the sales call, you don't have to spend 30 minutes just explaining what your offer is. They get on the call and they're basically ready to buy. All right, now let's talk about the foundations of high converting webinars. And these foundations will literally either make or break your webinar, right? And most people get this completely wrong, okay? They either overcomplicate it with fancy slides and animations, or they underprepare and they wing it like amateurs. So I'm gonna show you the exact formula that works time and time again, which I use across virtually any market for any high ticket offer. I've done it myself. I've also helped a bunch of my students do it. And this isn't a theory. This isn't what might work. This is a battle tested system that's generating millions in sales right now. But first we have to understand the high ticket webinar landscape. Now, like I said, this does work for low ticket and medium ticket as well, but I am gonna focus on high ticket because honestly, just about every successful person in the info product industry is selling high ticket. Very, very few of them have their low ticket offer as their primary moneymaker. Sometimes they'll have a low ticket offer that they use to upsell people to the high ticket offer, but it's not their primary way of making money. It's just to get people into your ecosystem. So first, let's understand the landscape because this isn't your average $47 product launch webinar. High ticket webinars are a completely different animal. The psychology is different. The objections are different, right? $47 would be like an impulse purchase, whereas a high ticket offer is a real commitment. So the entire approach needs to be different. So let me show you what actually works, starting with the difference between live and evergreen webinars. Now, live webinars create urgency, allow real-time interaction, and they let you answer questions on the spot, which is so unbelievably powerful. In a world of AI where everything is being automated, right? There's so much AI slop content being put out there. Everything's being automated. People absolutely love it when they can actually jump on and see the real you, the live you. So live webinars are raw, real, authentic, and they're incredibly powerful powerful when done right. And honestly, they don't take that much of your time. If you do a live webinar once a month, it's going to take like 2 hours of your time. And the secret to really understanding how to be elite when it comes to webinars, this is the thing that elite operators understand, is that a live webinar isn't just a presentation. It's a real-time sales conversation. It's just with dozens or hundreds of people simultaneously. So it's your chance to build instant credibility and also crush objections before they even come up. Now, when it comes to live webinars versus evergreen webinars, I am pretty biased here. I think live webinars are way better for like 99% of people. The only time where you would ever consider doing an evergreen webinar is when you have been practicing and tinkering with your webinars to such an extent where you literally have perfected it. And then you could maybe consider doing an evergreen webinar. And just to explain like live versus evergreen, live webinars are where you just do the webinar live, right? Like there's a bunch of people watching you, you go over some topics, et cetera, et cetera. Evergreen is where you do it live and you record it, but then you post it online. So evergreen webinars, people can access 24/7. They're convenient, they scale beautifully. But the thing is everyone knows that they're not live. Sometimes people will pretend like they're live webinars, but anyone that would be a high ticket buyer is going to figure out that it's not live, right? And they really just lack the real-time engagement that can make or break a high ticket sale. So evergreen webinars usually have very low conversion rates compared to live webinars. And most people just want to rush straight to automated webinars because they're lazy and they want to just, set it and forget it. But then they wonder why their conversion rates are in the toilet because you can't shortcut the process, man. Like if you want a high ticket sale on autopilot, you need to master live webinars first, then carefully transition to evergreen. So why start with live webinars instead of going straight to automation? Well, the answer is simple. Live webinars allow you to test, adapt, and perfect your pitch in real time. So you can see what resonates, what falls flat, and adjust on the fly. And this rapid optimization is crucial when you're dealing with premium offers where a 1% improvement in conversion can mean tens of thousands in additional revenue. So while other experts are spending months perfecting an evergreen webinar that ultimately flops, you could be running live webinars, making sales, and improving your presentation week by week. Plus, it's basically free marketing research because you're going to know exactly what people keep asking about. So the data you collect from live webinars is pure gold. It's like getting paid to do market research. And that's one of the kind of like sneaky secret little things that a lot of people don't talk about is when you do live webinars, you are talking to a bunch of prospects. And these people are very, very likely to actually want to work with you. And here's another misconception about webinars that's costing people millions. Most people think you need to create a brand new presentation every single time. They think you need to get it perfect the first time. And that's completely wrong. Since we've started running webinars, they've consistently generated 40 to 60% of our total revenue. But it's basically the same core presentation, just optimized over and over again and slightly changed. See, when people start getting familiar with your topic, you don't need to create something entirely new. Then keep what works and get rid of what doesn't, right? So don't listen to any guru that tells you need to reinvent the wheel every single month because it's complete BS. And that's the beauty of live webinars. You get immediate feedback. Your audience literally tells you what's working and what isn't working. They ask questions that reveal their objections, and they drop off at specific points that show you what's boring them. So this is all unbelievably useful data. This is like having 100 sales calls all at once. So they'll basically engage more with certain concepts that show you what's working, and they'll drop off with stuff that's not working. And this is priceless data that you'll never get from a pre-recorded presentation. And what's insane is most people completely ignore this data. They run the same failing webinar over and over, wondering why they're not making sales. Meanwhile, elite operators are constantly refining their presentation based on real-time feedback. And they're creating a sales machine that gets more effective with every iteration. And so you could be doing a webinar every week or every 2 weeks or every month. And each time you do it, you're going to get a ton of data. Now, one effective strategy that a lot of people are using right now is selling the webinar as a low ticket offer, right? So they'll actually charge people to attend the webinar. And people that actually pay to attend a webinar are significantly more likely to show up to the webinar, watch the webinar in full, and then they're significantly more likely to actually buy your high ticket product when you pitch them at the end. And there's some people that are doing these types of paid live webinars that have conversion rates of like 50% or more. So if you are going to charge low ticket, it's a good idea to actually charge for the webinar itself. I've done this before and I've made over $8,000 just on the low ticket offer to attend the webinar. And then after the webinar itself, we made significantly more money than that. But either way, high ticket webinars can be the fastest path to scaling a profitable business. And I've seen people go from struggling to hit $10,000 a month to consistently consistently doing $100,000 months just by shifting from low or medium ticket to high ticket offers presented through webinars, right? The math is simple. It's just so much easier to sell a high ticket product than to sell like 10 or 20 low or medium ticket products. Now, let me share some concrete numbers from our own business to drive this point home. When we started doing webinars, 40 to 60% of our total revenue came directly from high ticket webinar sales. Think about that. Nearly half of the business comes from just a few hours of work per week from me. So when you think about the amount of money that I'm making per hour when I do webinars, it's a total no-brainer, right? I'm consistently making at least like $5,000 an hour, sometimes a lot more than that on a good day. And it all comes just from presenting an irresistible offer to a qualified prospect or a bunch of qualified prospects on a webinar in a way that makes the decision a no-brainer. And we're not working harder. We're just being more selective about who we work with. And the crazy thing is, those premium clients are actually easier to work with. They take the process more seriously, they implement what you teach, and they get better results. Low ticket clients, on the other hand, are often the biggest headache, constantly asking for refunds, demanding endless support, and rarely implementing what they learn. Sometimes they'll buy your product and they don't even look at it. So my recommendation to you is to do high ticket webinars. You can either do them for free or you can actually have people pay to do them and do them live. Because at the end of the day, you want to be doing the highest leverage activities that you can do in your business. And if you're doing a 1 or 2 hour webinar once a week, and that's generating you like $10,000 or $20,000 each time, that means you're going to be making like $5,000 to $10,000 per hour. So this is about creating a business that serves you, not enslaves you. It's about building something that generates maximum revenue with minimal effort. And that's what webinars are all about. So next, let's talk about aligning webinars with your business goals. Most people are running webinars that are completely disconnected from their overall strategy. They're creating presentations based on what some expert told them to do, not based on what their specific business needs. And this is why most webinars fail miserably. You end up attracting the wrong people, making the wrong offer, or selling something that you can't actually deliver. Elite operators, on the other hand, understand that a webinar is just one piece of a larger sales ecosystem. Now, here's how I approach it, which is totally different than what the typical cookie cutter webinar expert teaches. First, define your end goal. Most people are so damn vague about this, right? I want to make money. No. How much money? From what offer? At what price point? Is it to sell a $10,000 consulting package, a $5,000 coaching program? Be crystal clear about this because everything else flows from here. Be specific or get demolished in the marketplace, right? If you're doing a webinar once a week, let's say that's 50 weeks a year, assuming that you take 1 or 2 weeks off. And if you're selling a $10,000 consulting or coaching product, that means if you sell one product every single webinar, you're going to be making $500,000 a year. If you sell 2 every webinar, you'll be making $1 million a year. That sounds pretty reasonable. It sounds pretty reasonable to be able to sell 2 coaching products per webinar, doesn't it? Second, identify the necessary beliefs. What does someone need to believe to invest that much with you? Most people completely skip this step and then they wonder why no one's buying. If someone needs to believe that your method can work for them in under 30 days and you never address that, you're screwed. And this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding the legitimate mental concerns and hurdles that your prospects need to overcome in order to buy your product. So for example, a lot of people that are thinking about starting on YouTube, because that's what I teach people how to do, is to grow and make money on their YouTube channels. They think that YouTube is too much work and it takes way too long. When in reality, if you do YouTube the right way, you can get it down to as little as 1 hour per week. So this is something that I absolutely need to mention in my webinars because it is an objection that just about everyone has. Third, you want to structure your webinar funnel to address each of those beliefs systematically, not randomly, not based on what some guru told you, but specifically designed for your offer. And the easiest way to do that is to actually just count up all the objections that you get on your webinars and in sales calls, and then start by addressing the objection that comes up the most, and then move your way down the list, and literally just build this into your webinar. So start with the most common objection, then the second most common objection, then the third most common objection, etc., etc. And of course, when you first start, you're going to have to do a lot of guesswork here. But as you get more data, which you will get with webinars, it's going to be much easier for you to tweak your webinar and make it perfect for your prospect. All right, next is choosing the right webinar platform. Now, most people are wasting thousands of dollars on fancy webinar platforms that they don't need, while others are using cheap crap that makes them look like a complete amateur. Now, I've tested out a lot of different webinar software, and the 2 that I like are Zoom and Webinar Jam. But I like Zoom better better, and here's why. First of all, Zoom is familiar. Your high-value prospects have probably already used it many times. And unlike some obscure webinar platform that requires them to download new software or figure out some confusing interface, Zoom is something they're already comfortable with. And they basically feel like they're just having a Zoom session with a person that they know or with a person that they are potentially interested in buying something from. Zoom is also reliable. The last thing you want is tech issues when you're closing big deals. Other platforms crash constantly. Zoom just works. It also allows for real interaction, which is crucial for building trust with high-ticket clients. You can see their faces, you can answer their questions in real time, and you can create an actual connection. And these three factors alone make Zoom the clear winner for live high-ticket webinars. Now, if you're doing this at scale, you might use Zoom Webinar, right? So Zoom Webinar is separate from Zoom. And the basic Zoom Webinar plan allows you to have up to 500 people, whereas Zoom Meetings limits you to just 50 people. So if you're doing this at scale, you absolutely need Zoom Webinar. With that being said, there's a few reasons why I like Webinar Jam as well. One, it's very easy to set up a landing page with Webinar Jam, and the landing page is actually the same exact page that the webinar is going to be on. So it's a little bit easier for people to show up. Whereas with Zoom, the landing page is going to be different than the actual link to the webinar itself. Additionally, I really like the reporting features and the data that you get with Webinar Jam, because the way that it reports data is just a lot easier. You can do the same thing with Zoom Webinar, but it's, you have to go through some work to actually get the data. And the way they report it isn't as visual. So yeah, Zoom has been absolutely crushing it for us. And again, I think people just feel like it's more of a conversation, like it's more of a connection, like they're Zooming with their favorite YouTuber or this person that they saw in ads. So they're really getting to know you better. But Webinar Jam is a solid choice. It integrates well with evergreen systems. It has robust analytics. So if you ever decide to do an evergreen webinar, I do recommend Webinar Jam. But I really recommend just starting your webinars off by using Zoom. And if you think you're going to have less than 50 people, you can use the basic Zoom. And if you think you're going to have more than 50 people, then use Zoom Webinar. And also Zoom is super affordable, right? And trust me on this one, I've seen too many people waste thousands of dollars setting up elaborate evergreen webinar funnels for presentations that were never proven to convert in the first place. And they're just wasting their time, effort, and money. That's like mass producing a product that literally nobody wants, right? You got to make sure that people actually want the product, and that's why you create a prototype before you mass produce it. And it's the same thing with live webinars and evergreen webinars. Now let's talk about how to attract high value registrations, because most people are completely botching this part of the process. They're wasting money on ads, making content, etc., that are attracting tire kickers and freebie seekers. They're filling their webinars with people who have zero intention of buying and then wondering why their conversion rates are so low. So this is a critical piece that most gurus completely ignore. They focus all their teaching on the webinar itself and not on getting the right butts in the right seats. So let me show you how to fix this, starting with your landing page. So like I said before, most people overcomplicate them. They try to teach, convince, and sell all at once. That's stupid. Your landing page has one job and one job only: to get qualified people to register. That's it, nothing else. Every single element on that page should serve that singular purpose, or it needs to be thrown in the trash. It's not meant to tell your life story. It's not meant to explain every detail of your offer, and it's definitely not meant to teach people stuff. Save that for the actual webinar. The biggest mistake I see is people trying to cram their entire sales pitch onto the registration page. That's like proposing marriage on a first date. You're skipping the essential steps in the relationship that everyone has to do. And elite operators understand that a landing page is just one piece of a larger sequence. So its only job is to get the right butts in the right seats. That's it. Now, the main goal is to validate your landing page concept before investing too much time in it. And most people spend weeks perfecting their landing page, obsessing over every word, design element, and button color. And then they launch it and crickets, because they never validated the core concepts. That's backwards. That's putting the cart before the horse. That's like spending months writing a book without knowing if anyone wants to read it. Smart operators, on the other hand, launch fast, collect data, and optimize based on real results, not theories, not opinions, not what some guru told you. Actual data from actual prospects. And I've already shown examples earlier in the video, but let's just go through it again. So this one is from Charlie Morgan, who makes $1.3 million a month. It's very simple, only has a headline, a sign-up form, and social proof. No complicated design elements that distract from the core offer or any crap like that. So there's no drawn-out sob story, no flashy animations, no choose-your-own-adventure mess or CTAs that leave people spinning or any crap like that I've seen. It's clean. It's clear, and it does one thing. It gets the right people to sign up for the webinar. So you don't need to over-engineer your funnel, right? This isn't rocket science. Keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. This is what all the pros are doing. So let me show you a real example from my business. This is our own landing page for live training. And notice how simple it is. There's a clear headline that speaks directly to the prospect's desired outcome. There's a simple form. There's some basic social proof. That's it. No fluff, no filler, no unnecessary complexity. And this page alone has pulled in 8,961 signups. Not because it's fancy or unique or creative, but because it follows the Peter framework to a T. Now you might be thinking, Shane, you're spending a lot of time on this. Let's get into the webinar stuff. But there's a reason for that, because you could make the best webinar in the world, but if you're not getting the right people to it and you're not signing them up in the right way, then either nobody's going to watch your webinar or you're going to get people watching it, but they're not going to be the right people, and therefore you won't make sales. And even if you do make sales, they're not going to be your ideal customers, so they're going to be a pain to deal with. But let's get into actually creating the webinar. So let's talk about crafting your high-ticket webinar content. And this is content that actually converts, because most people are creating presentations that are practically designed to fail. They're either dumping so much information that people feel overwhelmed, right? They think they're some kind of genius and they're dropping like the, super niche industry tips and tricks, or they're being so salesy that people tune out immediately. And this is probably the biggest misconception about webinar content. Most people think it's about creating the perfect slide deck, the right words, or even the charisma, but they're missing the real key. Because I used to think that webinars were about teaching everything I knew, right? I would spend like 90 minutes, sometimes even more, giving away all the best content, basically doing a comprehensive guide on how they can be successful on YouTube. And I was going through the content insanely fast. And I thought, if I just teach enough, they'll have to buy. But guess what? My conversion rates were absolute garbage. I was working my ass off creating these information-packed presentations and nobody was buying, because I was making the classic mistake that just about everybody's making of combining value with too much information, right? I'd spend 90 minutes giving away all my best content, thinking if I just teach enough, they'll have to buy. And after failing over and over again, and then figuring it out and generating 7 figures of revenue, I can tell you this without hesitation. The more that I taught, the less I sold. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, right? Most experts will tell you to provide value by teaching as much as possible. And that's the fastest way to create a webinar that educates people, but doesn't make any sales. And one of the biggest reasons for this is because people experience information overwhelm, right? They can't learn everything about YouTube in 90 minutes. That's impossible. And if you try to cram all of your information into their heads in 90 minutes, they're going to have a really bad time. And it's not going to be fun at all for them to attend the webinar. They're going to get to the end of the webinar when you start pitching them, and they're going to be exhausted. And they're going to be like, I definitely don't want to work with this guy anymore. So the truth is, there's a sweet spot where you provide enough value to establish credibility, but not so much that people feel like they can do it themselves or they feel overwhelmed. And most people never find this sweet spot. So what's the secret to finding the sweet spot? Well, it starts with your webinar topic. And most people completely screw this up. Now, a lot of webinar experts will tell you that you need to target people's pain points. And this is true, but I think you need to take this one step further and target their breaking points. So a pain point is, I wish I could make more money. A breaking point is, if I don't figure out how to scale beyond done-for-you services in the next 6 months, I'll have to shut down my agency. Do you see the difference there? One is a mild annoyance. It's generic and it applies to almost everyone, and it doesn't create urgency. The other is an existential threat. Their business is at risk of shutting down. So one might get someone to watch your free content, the other will get them to pull out their credit card because it's so specific. So it speaks to a particular type of business owner. It creates immediate urgency and it demands action. So a breaking point is basically like $1 million problem. So how do you find this $1 million problem? Well, I developed a method to do that. And it's all about identifying the one problem that your ideal client would pay $1 million to solve. Not metaphorically, literally. Most people try to solve 15 different problems in their webinar, and they think casting a wide net will help them catch more fish. And it actually does the opposite. It dilutes their message and it weakens their conversion. Elite operators, on the other hand, focus on one problem, the most urgent, pressing, painful problem that their ideal client faces. And they go all in on solving that one problem, and they position their solution as the obvious answer. And this laser focus is what separates the high converting webinars from the mediocre ones. So think about it. What problem is so urgent, so painful, so all consuming for your ideal client that if you could wave a magic wand and make it disappear, they'd happily write you a check for $1 million. Most marketers never think this way. They're focused on minor annoyances or generic pain points that don't create real urgency. But elite operators understand that people will pay almost anything to solve their biggest, most urgent problems. And they position their offers accordingly and charge premium prices as a result. So let me break this down into actionable steps. Step 1 of the $1 million problem method is to find the breaking point. Now let's take a look at several examples. Here's a general example. If I don't find a way to stop trading hours for dollars in the next 6 months, I'll have to start letting staff go and might lose the business that I've spent 5 years building. Here's a YouTube focused example. If I don't figure out how to make YouTube generate actual clients within the next 3 months, I'll have to abandon my channel completely after wasting a year of effort and thousands of dollars in equipment and editing. So what's the one thing that's keeping them stuck? Not the 15 different challenges that they might face, but the one thing that, if solved, would change everything. Now, with the general example, while they might mention many challenges, client acquisition, team management, cash flow, etc., the real breaking point is their business model. They're trapped in a service delivery hamster wheel where they personally need to be involved in every client project, creating a hard ceiling on growth. With the YouTube focused example, while they might mention many challenges, algorithm changes, content ideas, production quality, etc., the real breaking point is their content strategy. They're creating content that gets views but doesn't convert viewers into paying clients, making their YouTube channel a time and money sink rather than a business asset. And also think about what have they tried and failed. And this will show you where the market is misunderstanding the problem. So a general example here is they hired more team members, so this increased costs without proportionally increasing profits. They worked longer hours. This led to burnout without solving the scalability problem. And then they hit resistance from the existing clients and the market. And maybe they added more services, right? So they spread themselves too thin. With the YouTube example, maybe they put way too much effort into each individual video. They were focusing way too much on investing in better camera equipment, which led to improved quality, but didn't actually increase the leads. Or they were chasing trending topics, which maybe got more views, but it attracted the wrong audience, which is extremely common. So what would they pay anything to solve? This is the ultimate question. They would pay almost anything for a proven system to transform their agency from a time for money model to a scalable, predictable revenue model that doesn't require their constant involvement. This is a true breaking point. And if anyone's done an agency, you'll know that this is probably true because you were probably there at one point, because it threatens their entire business and lifestyle, right? This is a freaking existential threat, not an inconvenience. And they'd probably mortgage their house for a real solution to this problem. So by identifying this breaking point, your webinar can focus entirely on this transformation rather than surface level tactics, positioning your high ticket offer as the obvious solution to their existential problem. Now, once you've identified the breaking point, it's time for step 2, position your solution. Now, when we think of our webinar topic, we're going to use One Thing by Russell Brunson. And it looks like this. Use the core formula. How to benefit or how to benefit without what they tried that failed. This formula is so damn simple, yet 95% of people don't use it. They create complicated, jargon-filled webinar topics that nobody really understands, and they definitely don't care. Elite operators, on the other hand, understand that clarity beats cleverness every single time. They create webinar topics that speak directly to their prospects' breaking points. Now, let me show you an example of this. So the example here is positioning the solution for agency owners. A poor webinar topic example, this is what most people would do, is the ultimate agency growth blueprint, strategies for optimizing client acquisition and service delivery, or transformative agency leadership, implementing operational excellence for sustainable growth, or advanced client management systems for digital agencies in 2025. Now, these titles sound impressive, but they don't address the breaking point. They're vague, they're jargon-filled, and they don't speak to the existential threat that agency owners are facing. A good webinar topic example using this formula would be focusing on the benefit. So how to scale your agency to 100K plus monthly without working more hours. That's what they want, right? They want to be able to scale their agency without having to work more. Or version 2 would be emphasizing what failed. So how to double your agency revenue without hiring more employees or burning yourself out. Or version 3 would be hitting the breaking point directly. How to transform your agency from the time for money trap to a scalable profit machine in 90 days or less. Now, the best version is the one that most directly addresses their breaking point. And in this case, version 3 speaks directly to their existential fear, being trapped in a time for money model, and offers a clear timeline for transformation. And the title is crystal clear. It doesn't try to be clever or use industry jargon. It directly addresses what's keeping them up at night and offers a specific solution with a time frame. Now let's use the YouTube example. A poor webinar topic example would look like this. And this is what most people do, like I said. Advanced YouTube algorithm strategies for business growth in 2025, or the ultimate guide to optimizing your business YouTube channel, or creating high quality video content, a masterclass for beginners. Awful. Okay, a good webinar topic example using this formula, version 1 is focusing on the benefit, how to generate 50K plus in monthly revenue from your YouTube channel without being a video expert. Version 2, emphasize what failed, how to turn your YouTube channel into a client acquisition machine without uploading more videos or buying expensive equipment. And version 3, hit the breaking point directly, how to transform your dead-end YouTube channel into your #1 lead source in 60 days or less. These are banger topics. And in this case, version 3 speaks directly to their existential fear, having a YouTube channel that's a resource drain rather than a lead generator. And it offers a clear timeline for transformation. So when people read the headline for your webinar, you want them to think, that is exactly what I need right now. You don't want them to think, yeah, I guess that's kind of cool. Maybe if I have some time, I might watch the webinar. Maybe hopefully if they have a replay of the webinar, I might, skim through it a little bit. That's not what you want, right? You don't want that. You want them to think, holy crap, this is exactly what I need right now to solve this massively painful problem, right? This is something that should be a gut punch to your prospects when they read it. And again, I know this because I've made this exact mistake. For instance, I used to call my webinar the step-by-step guide on building a profitable channel, the 3 secrets. And after testing some things out, we changed it to how to make 1K per day on YouTube. And it performed significantly better. Our Jotform submissions skyrocketed, we booked tons of sales calls, and the number of people applying to work with us literally exploded. Why? Because remember this, and this is so important. People don't pay high ticket prices for information. They pay for transformation. So think of a high ticket webinar topic that transforms the ineffective system of your target audience. Don't just teach them something new. Show them why what they're currently doing is fundamentally flawed and how your approach is the solution that they've been searching for. All right, now let's talk about structuring your webinar for maximum perceived value. So let me show you something that might make you uncomfortable. See this? This is the traditional webinar structure that everyone teaches. It's the one that Russell Brunson made famous, and it's basically just the one that's in every course out there, just a slightly altered version. Now look, Russell is brilliant, right? Massive respect for him. He created like $1 billion company. But when you're selling premium offers to sophisticated buyers, they can smell through a script like this from a mile away, right? These are CEOs, they're founders, they're successful business owners. The moment they feel like they're being led through a formulaic presentation, they're gonna check out. And that's why we developed a completely different framework specifically for high ticket offers. It's the high ticket webinar framework, and it's specifically engineered for sophisticated audiences and premium offers. And this framework is completely different from the traditional webinar structure. It's designed to engage high value prospects who are skeptical of traditional sales tactics and have seen every marketing trick in the book. And let me show you exactly how it works. So while everyone else is following the same tired template or a slightly different version of the same tired template, you'll be presenting your offer in a way that feels fresh, authentic, and tailored specifically to sophisticated buyers, aka people that actually have money, aka people that can actually afford high ticket products. So let me show you exactly how it works. One, you've got the connection phase, and this is where you establish rapport and you engage the audience. Two, you've got the transformation phase, and this is where you deliver valuable insights and shift perspective. And then three, you've got the decision phase. This is where you guide the audience toward a decisive choice. And this simple 3-phase structure is deceptively powerful. It looks basic, but there's deep psychology behind every phase. And each one serves a specific purpose in moving prospects from skepticism to commitment. Now I'm gonna give credit where credit is due here. We developed this framework based on the teachings of the webinar goat, Jason Fladland, okay? This guy is an absolute beast at webinars. He wrote a book called One to Many, which is awesome. And our framework is a little bit different than his. So it's kind of a combination of his, Russell Brunson's, and our own stuff. But I do wanna give credit where credit is due because I think Jason's awesome and his stuff has helped us out a lot. So this simplified framework makes it easier for you to deliver and easier for your audience to follow. And these 3 parts run about 55 minutes total, more or less. And this might shock you if you're used to seeing 90-minute or 2-hour webinars. And this is something that we have tested extensively. Whenever we used to run 90-minute or 2-hour webinars, our conversions dropped like crazy because attention spans are shorter than ever. And your highest value prospects are the busiest people on your webinar. So you want to be pitching them before the 1-hour mark. And preferably you want to start pitching them around 45 minutes in or so. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's start with the connection phase. And this is the first 15 minutes of your webinar, and it's absolutely critical. This is where you either hook your audience or lose them forever. And with most webinars, by the time people get to their actual content, half the audience is already checked out mentally, or they've literally checked out. They just left the webinar. So I'm going to show you exactly how to structure these first 15 minutes to grab attention, build credibility, and set the stage for everything that follows. So let's break this down into 3 key segments. The first 5 minutes is the impact hook. And here's exactly what to do. First 60 seconds, drop your biggest result. Next 120 seconds, quick case study that proves it's possible. And final 120 seconds, preview the biggest insights that they'll get. Now this structure creates immediate interest, establishes credibility through proof, and gives people a reason to stay for the entire presentation. And remember, if you lose them here, it doesn't matter how good the rest of your presentation is, because they're not gonna see it. All right, next comes the second 5-minute segment. And this is market pain points. And this is where you demonstrate that you understand their world better than they do. But here's the key difference. You're not listing pain points, you're telling their story back to them. And this is where empathy and market knowledge really shines through. So you need to articulate their challenges in a way that makes them think, wow, This person really gets it. And elite operators dig deeper and speak directly to the specific frustrations of their ideal clients. So let me show you the difference with a concrete example. Most people would say you're struggling to get clients. Instead, try to say something like, it's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling, wondering if you've made a massive mistake starting your business. You've got a fancy website, perfect branding, and 0 clients. See the difference? One is surface level, the other hits them in the gut. Now, the first statement is generic and forgettable. The second creates an emotional response by painting a vivid picture that resonates with their actual experience. So this level of specificity and emotional resonance is what separates high converting webinars from mediocre ones. Now, the final segment of the connection phase is equally important. This is the third 5 minutes and it's the authority story. But here's the thing, this isn't your life story. You're not writing a memoir here. You're building a bridge between their problem and your solution. So you want to structure it like this. Where you were, aka your audience's current situation, the turning point, which was your discovery, and where you are now, which is your audience's desired outcome. Now this structure does something powerful. It positions you as someone who was once in their shoes. Then you found a solution and you achieved the results that they want. So it creates both credibility and relatability in one move. And elite operators keep it tight, relevant, and focused on the transformation. So an example when I'm presenting to a B2C audience that I use is I talk about how I was stuck in a 9-to-5 job. I was working as a pharmacist and I was stuck in that job. And then my realization is that YouTube was a phenomenal way to get clients and get traffic. And it basically solved all of my business's problems. And then after I was able to make YouTube work, business became incredibly easy. And I was able to quit my job, gain time, location, and financial independence, right? So that's like a miniature version of my story, but it was a story and it followed all 3 of those elements. And stories are incredibly valuable because people can't help but visualize things in their head when you tell a story. And it helps them to see that the transformation is possible for them too. Now, this connection phase approach might seem different from what you've heard before. So let me introduce you to another powerful structure that you can use for your introduction. And this is something that you can mess around with. And sometimes this is going to be better in different niches and for different offers. And this one I got straight from Jason Fladley. And he's a beast. Like I said, definitely watch his stuff. He's awesome. But in Jason Fladley's 3-step webinar introduction framework, he starts off by making a bold, specific promise, right? So he'll say something like, by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to specific outcome. Right? So you establish exactly what the attendees will gain. And this is about making a clear, specific promise right at the beginning of your webinar. Not some vague, you'll learn some cool stuff garbage, but a concrete outcome that your audience desperately wants. And most people are way too timid with their promises, right? They're afraid of overpromising, so they underpromise and lose their audience's attention from the start. Elite operators, on the other hand, make bold, specific promises that grab attention and create immediate interest. Now let's take a look at how Felix did this one. So Felix makes a clear promise at the beginning. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you the 3 steps that I teach to my students that has allowed them to make 439% here like Jerome, or 350% like Michael, or 28% like Colin, or 104% like Patrick. And then he later reinforces, imagine your profit potential if you knew exactly what trade to open and win, if you knew how to fully automate your profit taking and your risk management. So Felix shows real results right away. And he tells people exactly what his students earned using actual percentages, and he doesn't make vague promises. Instead, he shows the numbers first. And this makes people instantly curious about his 3-step system. When people see the results, they pay attention. Now, of course, I use this framework in my live training, the YouTube Rulebook, 3 simple tweaks on your YouTube channel to make 1K per day in 2025. So here's how I did it. I make my promise clear from the beginning of my webinar. We're going to go over the 3 secrets to 10 extra growth on YouTube in 2025, the 3-step process. I reinforce this by sharing my results. This was, I believe, last month. It was around $73,000 or so. We got lots of videos that reached over 1 million views. I think we have well over 10 videos now that have reached over 1 million views. And I quickly established that this isn't just some theory, it's a proven system. By saying something like, my methods have been proven with clients in all different kinds of niches. Now, the second step for Jason Fladley is to acknowledge their objections. So you want to preemptively address common excuses or concerns. So you could say something like, and it doesn't matter if objection 1 or objection 2 or objection 3. And this is absolutely brilliant. Instead of waiting for objections to come up later, you bring them up immediately and you diffuse them. You're saying, I know what you're thinking and it's not a problem. And most presenters try to avoid mentioning objections, thinking they'll plant negative ideas ideas. And that is absolutely backwards thinking. You don't want to do that. Your audience already has these objections in their mind. It's already done with. So by addressing them up front, you clear the way for them to actually hear your message. So Felix addresses potential objections early. He says, and when I started to figure out these rules for myself, I was running out of money, I had a massive back injury, and I had a failing business. And he addresses the common excuse that investing is complicated. With my system here, you don't need to study stocks, financial reports, and you don't need to learn lots of strategies, and you don't need to watch your trades. And then for beginners, he might say, maybe you're thinking, Felix, I'm a beginner and new to this. It's a lot of information just now, and I'm not sure I can take this on right now. Then he counters with a story about Patricia, a 73-year-old grandmother who succeeded. And this helps viewers feel connected to him. They think, he was once like me. He knows how people worry trading is too hard. So he keeps saying how simple his system is. And he shares stories about regular people who made money with his method. And this makes viewers think, if they can do it, so can I. And he takes care of all these worries before he tries to sell anything. Now, on the other hand, what I do is I address several potential objections early in my presentation. For those concerned about equipment, I say iPhones are really good now, especially like iPhone 15 and above. You can buy a used iPhone 15 and the quality is insane. For beginners worried about content quality, analysis paralysis is your biggest enemy. You don't need to think about the length of the video. Chances are 99% chance you have something within arm's reach right now that you can start recording videos with. And for those thinking their niche might be saturated, there's so many untapped niches out there. So many opportunities, especially within the educational niche, right? So I directly confront some of the most common mental barriers that prevent action: perfectionism, gear obsession, and overthinking. And instead of just dismissing these concerns, I provide practical examples of how simple it is to start, using whatever phone you have. And then I emphasize that action beats perfection every time. I create urgency around taking immediate action rather than waiting for ideal conditions. But there's one more critical step to complete this powerful introduction, and that is to establish your authority. So Jason Flavlian likes to say something like, here's why I'm bold enough to make such claims. So in this case, you need to contextualize your credentials in relation to your promise. And this is where you briefly establish why you're qualified to deliver on the bold promise that you just made. But notice something key here. You're not just randomly bragging about yourself. You're specifically explaining why you can deliver on this promise. So most people either skip credibility entirely or they drone on about their entire resume, and both approaches fail. You need to establish just enough authority to make your bold promise believable, but not so much that you seem unrelatable. So as an example, Felix establishes his credibility here. My name is Felix Print, and I'm a former investment banker and now retired investor. And this demonstrates expertise through specific results. Would it be helpful for you to spot stocks before they go up? And these ones hit FRAs, a trade I'm still in. It's up almost 20% or something right now. So he shows examples of successful trades. Rails up 183% in 42 days, and Instilled by 466% in 33 days. And then he references his extensive experience. We've helped over 16,000 people so far. So Felix shows that he knows what he's talking about right away. He tells people that he worked as an investment banker, which gives him credibility, and this makes them trust him more. So he's not just talking, he's showing real trades with exact numbers and dates. And instead of saying, I've made a lot of money, he shows specific trades with real percentages. And this proves his system actually works. So this is how I establish my credibility throughout. For instance, I share specific client success stories like Josh made it from 1K to 186K per month. Sean's one of our recent success stories. With 9 months of working with us, he went from 30K to over 600K per month. And I demonstrate my expertise by analyzing real channels. These are 2 examples of what your channel should not look like. And here's what a channel should look like. And I show my lifestyle results. I'm able to travel the world. This is me in Vancouver, British Columbia, Tokyo, Singapore. And I show that I know my stuff in 2 ways. First, I share my own YouTube stats and growth. And then second, I show how my clients are doing really well too. So I don't just say, trust me, bro, right? Instead, I look at real YouTube channels and point out what's working and what's not. And I also show how I can travel while only working a few hours. And this proves my system works and gives people the freedom that they want. So this 3-step framework creates an incredibly powerful opening that hooks your audience from the very first minute. Now let's move on to the heart of the webinar, the transformation phase. So this is the 30-minute section where you deliver the core value and you create belief shifts necessary for someone to invest in your high-ticket offer. And this is where most people crash and burn. They either dump endless information without any strategic structure, or they rush through it to get to their pitch. And both approaches fail miserably. Now, the transformation phase isn't about teaching everything you know. It's about strategically shifting your audience's beliefs about what's possible and what's important. So in order to do this, I recommend using the breakthrough points framework. And this falls into 3 10-minute segments. And basically what you're going to be doing here is you're going to be telling a story that has 3 different acts in it. The first act is the list, the second act is the mechanism, and the third act is the bridge. And each segment gets 10 minutes of your presentation. And this system works well because it changes what people think step by step. First, it breaks down their old ideas. Then it gives them new ones, and by the end, buying your offer just makes sense to them. It's the logical next step. And you need to make sure that you create these crucial belief shifts. And most webinars simply don't do it. They just regurgitate information and they just throw information at the wall, and then they hope that somehow this is going to lead to a sale, and it rarely does. So let's break down each of these breakthrough points in detail, starting with the list. So create a list of 5-day items that could be the biggest mistakes in your industry, things people must stop doing immediately, industry lies that are holding people back or keeping them stuck, and required elements for success. And when it comes to the required elements of success, you need to talk about the most important things. And the magic of this approach is it's impossible to mess up and easy to create. And you're essentially laying out all of the reasons that they're stuck. Now, this segment does something powerful. It creates an agreement between you and your audience. They're nodding along thinking, yes, that's exactly why I'm struggling. And by the end of the segment, they see you as someone who truly understands their problems. So let's use Felix's webinar as an example again. Felix keeps things simple with his 3-step trading system. He doesn't use too many steps. Instead, he focuses on just the key things that people need to succeed. So he talks about how there are 3 parts to spotting a great trade, which he then breaks down into 1, resistance zones, red lines on a chart, 2, the 50-day moving average line, and 3, trading volume. And later in the webinar, he implicitly outlines why people fail, because they don't know when to exit trades, they hold losing stocks too long, they try to figure everything out on their own without mentors, and they overcomplicate the process by studying too many strategies. So here's how I did mine. I explicitly laid out the biggest mistakes by far and other critical mistakes. So number 1, the biggest mistake by far is people don't upload. The second biggest mistake is they don't upload consistently. And then the third is that they do upload consistently, but their ideas for the videos aren't good. And the next biggest mistake is your videos don't deliver the content that people want. The fifth is you have the wrong mindset. And the sixth is you don't follow a proven process. Now, I directly stated that if you reverse these mistakes I'm about to show you, you'll be 100 times more likely to succeed. Now, after laying down all the possible list, here comes the breakthrough point number 2, the mechanism. So expose why everything they've tried has failed, but don't just point out the problems, break their current belief system. And this is really structured in 3 parts, which we'll cover in the next few slides. And this is where we create the crucial paradigm shift that makes your offer irresistible. And we're not just pointing out problems, we're changing how they think about solving those problems. So let's break down the 3 components of the mechanism, starting with the pattern interrupt. So the pattern interrupt is a thing that basically knocks them out of their traditional stuck way of thinking. And you want to start with, here's why everything you've tried hasn't worked. Then you hit them with the uncomfortable truth about their industry. For instance, the reason most fitness programs fail isn't lack of motivation, it's because they're built on a lie that you need to work out 5 days a week to see results. And this creates a mental pattern interrupt that makes your audience stop and think, wait, what? It challenges their existing beliefs and it opens them up to new possibilities. So here's an example from Felix. Winning stocks eventually turn into losers. You see how this stock went up? You know, I bought it around $6. It went up to $16 to $18 near the top. Do you know where it's trading right now? Well, it's down there at $1.86. That means if you just held onto this, you would have wiped out 90% of your money. This disrupts the common belief that finding winning stocks is enough and that holding long term is all you need to do. So Felix shows the real problem is not knowing when to exit. Now here's how I did mine. Analysis paralysis is your biggest enemy. Just thinking too much. You need to start taking action. I challenged assumptions about video production. The one thing that makes more difference than anything else is the idea. If you're wasting a bunch of time on script writing or video editing, you're not spending enough time on the thing that actually matters, right? So many people out there think that they need better camera or more tech or a teleprompter or a better mic or a lens, or they think they need to be some kind of crazy good video editor or they need to hire a video editor, et cetera, et cetera. It's all analysis paralysis. And so I challenge them on that limiting belief. Now let's move on to the second component of the mechanism. The paradigm shift. This is where you show them the fundamental flaw in conventional thinking. You're creating a paradigm shift that changes how they view the entire problem. So you may use the formats, everyone believes common assumption, but here's the reality. Or the traditional approach says old way, but what if I told you new way? And this is absolutely crucial for high ticket sales. Without this shift, people will just try to solve their problems using the same flawed approaches that they've always used. And your job is to help them see why those approaches will never work. And elite operators understand that people won't pay pay premium prices for more of the same. Remember, they want to pay for a transformation, and that requires a fundamental rethinking of the problem itself. Now, here's an example of how Felix did it. The truth is that I've made those mistakes many times, and I'm sure you have too. So how do I solve this problem? Well, I surrounded myself with mentors who knew better. So Felix challenges conventional beliefs. With my system here, you don't need to study stocks, financial reports, you don't need to learn lots of strategies, and you don't need to watch your trades. And then here's how I shifted their paradigms in the live training. Everyone wants to get paid to do hobbies. I recommend treating YouTube like a business and focusing more on helping other people. And I reframe video quality assumptions by saying things like, you don't need that lens, you don't need that camera, you don't need that lighting, you don't need that studio, just stop making excuses and upload videos. And that leads us to the third component, the better way. So present your unique mechanism. But here's the key, don't teach it yet, just prove that it exists. So use this simple structure to introduce your solution without giving away all the details. What it is, why it works, and proof that it works, which is usually a quick case study. And this creates a massive desire for your solution. You're showing them that there's a better way. You're proving that it works, but you're not giving them enough information to implement it themselves. What you're doing is you're creating curiosity and desire instead. And for Felix, here's how he did it. What it is, the Wall Street Protocol, his automated system for entries and exits. Why it works, we set a stop loss and we decide where to set this even before we open that trade or that investment. And then proof it works, show specific trades with impressive returns, rail up 183% in 42 days, and Instilled is up 466% in 33 days. And here's how I said mine on my webinar. What it is, the icon method. Find a video from a small channel that got a lot of views and it did extremely well despite the fact that the video itself was bad. Why it works, if you use this method consistently, you are going to find a video that pops off. It's just a matter of time. And proof that it works, I showed examples of channels that implemented my methods that saw dramatic growth. This channel, for instance, got 97% more views than usual, and this one got 159,000 more views than usual. So with the mechanism established, we move to the third breakthrough point, the bridge. Show them the path forward, but, and this is crucial, make it clear that they need your help to walk it. And this is where everything comes together. You're showing them the path forward, but you're making it clear that they need your help. And this segment creates a clear connection between the problems that you've identified, the paradigm shift you've created, and your solution as the obvious next step. And without this bridge, your prospects don't see why they need you specifically, right? So if you don't do this, you might have done all the work to make them problem aware, solution aware, and mechanism aware, but then they just think, oh, I can do it on my own. Right, so you've done all the marketing work to, make them aware of these problems they have, the solution, that would actually solve those problems and the specific mechanism that you use to implement that solution. But then they might just go off and try to do it on their own, or even worse, and this one really stings and it happens to a lot of people, they go and buy a coaching program from your competitors. Ouch. So make sure that you establish the bridge. And in order to do this, you should present two paths forward in the webinar. For instance, if you want to feel good, you have two options. You can go away at the end of this lesson and do it yourself, and you'll likely lose money as you learn. Or option two, you get an experienced mentor. So he positions his mentoring program as the most important bridge. You learn faster. You get all the protocols handed to you. You get my charts every week. So you see my research every week, and you get one-on-one personalized coaching sessions. And Felix reinforces that trying to implement his system alone is much harder. You'd be surprised how many people walk away from this video and say, I will now sit in a dark room by myself and I'll figure this out on my own. And I also present my offer as the ultimate bridge. What if you and I could trade places? What if our swap meant that you don't have to worry about attracting subscribers, the competition, or saturation, or be charismatic or overly extroverted, or stress about creating high quality videos? But I emphasize that there's two paths, but I clearly position myself as the faster and better option. Option one, take what you learned from my free training resources and try to get it working for yourself, which took me over 7 years and 5 failed YouTube channels to master, but you can definitely do it. Or option two, take the swap right now and I handhold you for the next 6 months. And I reinforce the exclusive limited nature of this help. I can only handhold about 3 to 5 people at a time because you deserve to have my team and I's full commitment. And now we move on to the final phase of the webinar, the decision phase. Now the decision phase is the final 10 minutes of the webinar, and this is where you transform skepticism into belief and you guide your prospects towards making a decision. Now the decision phase isn't about pitching, it's about building the case for change. It's about creating such a compelling vision of what's possible that your offer becomes the obvious next step. And this is where you transform skepticism into belief. And that's the ultimate goal of the decision phase. You're not trying to convince people to buy something that they don't want. You're helping them believe that a transformation is possible for them. It's like proposing marriage on a first date. You're skipping the essential steps in the relationship. Whereas if you're doing this the right way, you're going to understand that belief must precede buying. Without belief, no amount of discounts, bonuses, or scarcity will create high ticket sales. And as I said earlier, you're not selling yet. You're building the case for change. So what you're selling at this point isn't your product or service, it's the decision to change. You're helping your prospects see that continuing on their current path is more painful than taking action with your solution. And this approach is far more powerful than any direct pitch could ever be. And let me show you the exact framework that you can use. So this 4-part framework is specifically designed to create the belief and the urgency needed for high-ticket decisions. And each component serves a specific psychological purpose in moving prospects from interest to action. So let's break down each of the components, starting with the future state. So this is where you create a compelling vision of what's possible, right? You want to paint a picture in vivid detail. So imagine waking up every morning knowing exactly what to do. Picture having a predictable system that delivers clients like clockwork, right? You're helping your prospects experience the transformation in their imagination before they experience it in reality. And Felix vividly states the future his clients can achieve. For instance, he says, success is being able to choose what to do with your time, and you can choose what to do with your time if you have the money to back it up. Whether that means to you, I don't know, waking up without an alarm clock or traveling the world or helping your family is up to you. Our goal is passive gains so that we can live the life that we want to live and do the things that we were put on this planet for. That's what life's all about. Now, likewise, I create a compelling vision of the freedom that my system provides. Day by day, month after month, the revenue just keeps coming in like clockwork while you work, in some cases, even less than 1 hour per week once you get the system set up. And I say things like every single time you make a video, you want it to be like a little soldier whose only job is to go out there and get you views and get you subscribers and make you money. And I say things like I'm able to travel the world. I think I worked about 6 hours in a 2-month period a few months ago, and a 7 to 8 figure YouTube business that takes only 1 hour per week once you get it set up. Now, most business owners skip this entirely. They focus on the problem and their solution, but never help prospects envision the transformation clearly. And without this vision, there's no emotional driver for change. But now that you've established where they want to go, you need to address what's stopping them from getting there. And this is the gap, right? So you've got their current situation, you've got their desired situation, and then there's a gap between those two things. So show 3 things standing between your prospects and that future. 1, the knowledge gap, what they don't know. 2, the skills gap, what they can't do. And 3, the implementation gap, what they won't do alone. And this is where you help prospects understand why they haven't achieved the transformation on their own. You're not shaming them, you're helping them see the legitimate obstacles in their way. So a knowledge gap example with Felix is, without the 3 rules that I'm going to give you in this video in the next few minutes, you're losing out on huge opportunities. Or like many of you, I spent about 10 years in the markets doing the wrong things until I was taught how to do the right things. So an example of the skills gap is, would you have sold out there if you're honest? I'll explain the rule for exiting these trades in just a few moments. And the implementation gap is, without an experienced mentor, you're going to fall for some of the traps that the market puts out there for you. Now, here's some examples from my channel. The knowledge gap. The biggest mistake by far is people don't upload. You upload, but the ideas for the videos aren't good. And the next biggest mistake is your videos don't deliver the content that people want. An example of the skills gap is you want to make sure that your title, thumbnail, and intro are not only good, but they're congruent with each other. And if I would have put this title right here on this thumbnail, it wouldn't have made any sense at all. And I see this all the time on channels that don't get views. And then the implementation gap, analysis paralysis is your biggest enemy. If you haven't uploaded your first video, just take your phone out and record a video now. And I can't tell you how many people have been like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to start a YouTube channel for like 10 years now. So it's important that you acknowledge these gaps, and most presenters don't do this. And then you need to position your offer as the bridge across them. And with the gaps identified, you need to show them the way forward. And that's the next step, the path forward. Step 1, what they must stop doing. Step 2, what they must start doing. And step 3, what they must do differently. And this is crucial. Show only the steps, not the whole journey. Now, this segment does something powerful. It gives prospects just enough direction to understand the path forward, but not enough to walk it alone. So you're going to be demonstrating expertise while creating the need for your guidance. Now, here's some examples from Felix. What they must stop doing. Stop holding on to losing stocks, stop trading without a system, and stop trying to figure it out alone. And what they must start doing. Step 1, we spot the breakout. Step 2, we buy the stock. Step 3, we set a stop loss. And we move those stops up as the stock goes higher and higher. And what they must do differently. We trade stocks that we flag, right? We trade one strategy and we automate the profit taking and the risk management. We set a stop loss and we decide where to set this even before we open that trade or that investment. And then some examples from mine, what they must stop doing. Stop making excuses. You don't need that lens. You don't need that camera. You don't need that lighting. Do not over edit your videos at first. That is the worst thing you could possibly do. What they must start doing, uploading 3 videos per week, because the one thing that makes more difference than anything else is the idea. And use the icon method. Find a video from a small channel that got a lot of views that's objectively bad. And what they must do differently. Get more niche, and then if you're going to copy anyone for their idea, you should copy smaller channels. And make sure your title, thumbnail, and intro are not only good, but they're congruent with each other. And most presenters make one of 2 mistakes here. Either they give too much detail, removing the need for their offer, or they give too little, failing to demonstrate real expertise. And that is the critical choice. Path A, continue struggling with their current approach. Path B, take a new approach with proven results. Present them with options. This creates a clear decision point. You're not forcing anyone to buy, you're simply making explicit the choice that they're already facing. Continue to do what's not working, or try something new that could change everything. So Felix clearly presents the decision fork in the road. If you want to feel good, you have two options. You can go away at the end of this lesson and do it yourself, and you're likely going to lose money as you learn, or option two, you get an experienced mentor. And you'd be surprised how many people walk away from this video and say, I'll now sit in a dark room by myself and I'll figure this out on my own. And they work really hard. Some do it for months, some do it for years. And if you want to make your money work for you, let's chat. Now here's an example from my webinar. Option one, take what you learned from my free training resources and try to get it working for yourself, which took me over 7 years and 5 failed YouTube channels to master. Option two, take the swap right now and I handhold you for the next 6 months. Now here's why this entire approach works so well. You're selling the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And they position their product as the vehicle to get them from where they are to where they want to be. So you can almost think of this entire process like two different islands. This is the analogy that I like to use for this. You've got Hell Island, which is where they are right now, and Heaven Island, which is where they want to be. Now, you want to clearly establish Hell Island and Heaven Island, right? You want to make it vividly clear where they are right now and where they want to be. And this is by talking about things like, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering how they're going to pay their employees. That's Hell Island. And then Heaven Island would be not having to wake up to an alarm, being able to travel the world, not having to worry about money, time, or anything like that, having that kind of freedom and independence. And then once you've clearly established those two islands, what you want to do is establish that your offer is the vehicle to get them from the island that they're on right now, Hell Island, to Heaven Island. And then you want to establish why you are the best driver for that vehicle, because other people might have very similar offers. And that's the really painful part that a lot of people miss out on, is they'll convince the person, hey, this is the best vehicle to get from, Hell Island to Heaven Island. And then they're like, oh yeah, I totally believe you. But then they don't buy from you and they buy from your competitor. So you did all the work to convince them and then they go and buy from your competitor, which sucks. But the next crucial step that so many people miss is you need to establish that gap between the two islands, because right now the two islands are way too close to each other, right? Because if you make the islands seem way too easy to get to each other, then they're going to think, oh, I can just do this on my own, or oh, I can go and buy, some cheap product that'll teach me how to do it. So at that point, once you've established Hell Island, Heaven Island, and that there's a viable vehicle to get from Hell Island to Heaven Island, or a boat, I guess you could say, then you want to establish that gap, right? Make sure that they know that it's not going to be an easy swim to get across by themselves. They're going to need a boat and they're going to need a really good captain to help them get across the water, because it's a long distance and maybe there's some, great white sharks or crocodiles in the water or whatever, right? So that is how you would establish the gap, like the problems that people run into. And you must make sure that you do this in your presentation. And one way you can make sure that you nail that last point is strategic incompletion, right? You're giving them enough to understand the path, but not enough to walk it alone. And in many cases, this isn't some tactic, like they literally are not going to know enough to do it on their own, right? And this is one of the most powerful concepts in high-ticket webinars. You're providing just enough value and direction for prospects to see the path forward and see it clearly, but not so much that they can implement everything without your help. And most presenters either give too little, creating no value whatsoever, or they give too much, removing the need for their offer altogether. And then the person ends up just swimming across from Hell Island to Heaven Island on their own, or at least trying to, or they'll rent another cheaper boat to get from Hell Island to Heaven Island from your competitors. So strategic incompletion hits the perfect sweet spot in between. And this approach transforms you from a mere information provider into an essential guide on their journey. And that is a much, much more valuable position to be in, right? So position yourself as the bridge, position yourself as the boat captain. Do not give them a reason to try it themselves first. This is absolutely critical for high ticket offers. You're not just selling information or tools, you're selling guidance, support, and a proven path to results. You're selling a transformation. So don't position yourself as an information provider, right? You're not a teacher here. And really your prospects should be thinking, this makes perfect sense. I need help implementing this. Not, great info, let me try this myself first. Or even worse, this presentation sucked. And the difference between these thoughts can make you millions. When people think, I need this now, they buy right away. When they think, I can do this myself, they put it off forever. And most webinars accidentally create the wrong thought. They share so much information that people think that they can figure it out alone. Or they focus so much on teaching that people forget about taking action. And the best presenters carefully design everything to make people think, I need this now. And the results are huge. So how do you get people to think, I need this now? Well, Hell Island has a volcano on it and it's about to erupt, right? That's the analogy. So you need to give them a reason why they need to do this now. And then Heaven Island has a lottery where they're giving away $1 million, but you need to do it immediately, right? Like you have to join the lottery right now, right? So think of reasons why they have to do it immediately. So this is things like urgency and scarcity. So for instance, saying things like we have limited spots, or saying things like the YouTube algorithm right now is very friendly towards smaller channels, or saying things like this offer is only available for those who sign up in the next hour, or saying things like we're running out of consultation slots, etc., etc. Create urgency and scarcity. Give them a reason to take action now. And by the way, don't make this stuff up. Make it legit. Now, another thing I want to briefly touch on when it comes to your webinar slides, don't make them tacky, right? Don't use some super fancy, crazy webinar slides, but at the same time, also don't make them look like they were created by someone who just did their first presentation in kindergarten. So when it comes to ideal high-ticket webinar slides, you want a certain design style, you want visual quality, you want branding consistency, and you want data visualization. So a clean minimalist style is great. You want high-quality images, you want consistent branding throughout, and you want strategic use of charts, graphs, or some type of visual proof to illustrate points. And again, the best thing to do here is just to look at webinar slides from people that you know are making money, and then model your slides based off of theirs. Now, a few really good tools to make your slides look awesome are Icon Finder, Morgfile, and Napkin AI. I especially like Napkin AI. It is amazing for creating awesome graphics. So here's an example of bad webinar slides. You know, the text is really hard to read. The pictures are in the background. It looks really tacky, just really bad, right? Too wordy, no balanced composition, no contrast in color. The words cannot be read easily. Yeah, avoid stuff like this. Now let's look at what good slides look like. So here's some examples from some winning webinars. Notice the sleek minimalist design. Nothing fancy, nothing tacky, fewer words, they use related icons and images, and the colors complement each other. All right, now let's talk about mastering high stakes webinar delivery, because now you've got some amazing webinar slides, but how do you actually deliver them? Because most people focus all their energy on crafting the perfect content and slides, and then they wing the actual delivery. And that's a huge mistake. So how do you deliver your webinar is just as important as what you're delivering. Maybe even more important. And I've seen brilliantly structured webinars fail miserably because the delivery was flat. And I've also seen simple webinars convert like crazy because the delivery was dynamic. Now let me show you how to deliver your webinar in a way that commands attention and respect from high ticket prospects. Now, first of all is presenting with authority and credibility. People think authority comes from using big words and sharing lots of information. And that's wrong. That is a great way to scare people away. Real authority is about making things as simple as possible, even if they are complicated. It's about helping people say, wow, I get it now. And when I ran webinars that made lots of money, I learned something surprising. People don't want you to teach them everything. They want moments when something clicks in their mind. They want you to teach them the most important parts that they can understand and implement quickly. And the best webinars don't dump information. They create moments when people suddenly understand something important. So want to sound like an expert? Don't try to sound smart. Instead, make complex ideas easy to understand. Sprinkle in little tips that make people think differently. These small changes in how you talk will make people see you as an authority. Because anyone can teach steps, but only a true expert can change how people think about what's possible, right? You want to transform how people think. You want to help them see possibilities that they couldn't see before and approaches that they never would have considered. And getting them to believe in you and your product are essential in them actually getting results. So when you're doing this, believe me, the more you get them to believe in you and your product, the higher the chance that they're actually going to get results. So it's very important that you do whatever it takes to get them to believe, because that will directly influence their likelihood of success. Now, when it comes to your actual slides themselves, they should be relatively minimalist. But what you can do is you can put important notes. I recommend doing them in bullet points, and then you can present it in presentation mode where only you can see the notes and they can't. Now, another thing that really helps with this is using the Elgato teleprompter. So this is a teleprompter where you can actually see the slides on your screen, but it also acts as a second screen. So you can actually drag your PowerPoint onto the teleprompter, so when you're looking at your PowerPoint, people think that you're looking directly at them. And this makes you seem like a freaking genius because you're just able to talk off the top of your head, even though in reality, you're probably just looking at your notes. With that being said, I recommend trying not to read things word for word because it's gonna come across a lot more genuine if you just have bullet points and you just kind of talk off the top of your head. Then the other important thing is make sure you practice your webinar before you present it live. You know, present your webinar to your friends or to business partners or maybe to your team team members or to your poor girlfriend or your mom who has to listen to you, but make sure you practice the delivery before you actually deliver it, because you're going to feel much more confident about it if you do that. And when you're presenting the webinar, try to be as fluid as possible, right? Don't just read off the slides, like read the words that are on the slides. You can do that once in a while, but don't do it all the time. And at the same time, don't be robotic and just read things word for word. Try to be charismatic when you're presenting the webinar. And a great way to do this is just pretend like you're presenting something to a friend. Like pretend like the camera is your friend when you're presenting a webinar. And that's gonna help you tremendously when it comes to being fluent, because your brain is just gonna think that you're having a conversation. Now let's talk about handling sophisticated questions and objections. Because at the end of the webinar, once you do the pitch, which by the way, the screen for the pitch should look something like this. We like to have a QR code that people can scan with their phone to sign up for a call. We also like to put a link there just in case people wanna type it into their browser. And of course, we'll post the link in the chat. But at this point, you are going to be taking questions. So at this point, there is going to be a webinar Q&A. And a lot of times people are going to have objections. Now, objections are not obstacles. They're opportunities. They're not barriers to the sale. They're the pathway to the sale. Whenever you get an objection, you need to think of that as an opportunity to overcome it, not just for the person who asked, but for everyone else who's likely thinking the same thing. So a big mistake people will make is trying to overcome an objection. And when you do this, you create resistance. You put yourself in an adversarial position with your prospect. You're essentially saying, you're wrong and I'm going to prove it. And that approach might work for low ticket offers where the risk is minimal, but for high ticket offers where prospects are considering investing thousands of dollars, it creates a dynamic that kills trust. And when someone is considering investing $5,000, $10,000, even $15,000 with you, they don't want their objections overcome. They want to feel understood. And this is crucial. High ticket prospects don't want you to debate them or prove them wrong. They want to feel heard, understood, and respected. And the crazy thing is, their questions are their objections. So when someone asks, what camera do you use? They're not really asking about your equipment. What they're really saying is, I don't think I can do this because I don't have fancy gear, right? This is a perfect example. On the surface, it's a simple technical question, but the underlying objection is about their ability to implement without expensive equipment and their doubts around that. So instead of waiting for someone to ask about the equipment, I'll say something like, now you might be thinking you need some fancy camera setup to make this work. Well, let me show you something interesting. There are people making millions per month using an iPhone. The camera doesn't make the money, the strategy does. So this is preemptive objection handling, and you should try to put this into your presentation. So instead of waiting for the objection to come up, you address it before it even surfaces. Now, when you master this approach, something powerful happens. And this is exactly what happened to us, because we killed the objection before it could even surface. So by addressing common objections proactively, you demonstrate that you understand the prospect's concerns better than they do. You show that you've thought through the obstacles that they'll face and you have solutions ready. So you really want to make a list of all the objections that you get during the webinars and also the objections that you get on sales calls. And you want to address the most common objections in your presentation, and then make sure that you always have answers for all of the other objections that might come up towards the end. And when you have really good answers for these, this builds trust and credibility. Your prospects think, wow, they really get it. They understand exactly what I'm worried about. It's almost like they can read my mind. And this brings us to one of the biggest advantages of webinars over other sales methods. Webinars are so powerful, you get to address these objections before they even come up on the sales call. So if you're taking the calls, you're gonna love this. And if you're not taking the calls, you got a sales team, they're gonna love this as well. And this is one of the biggest reasons why webinars convert so much better than other sales methods for high ticket offers. So some examples for how to do this would be, instead of waiting for someone to say, that's expensive, you say, now you might be thinking that this seems expensive. In fact, I thought the same thing when I first saw high ticket offers, but let me show you something interesting. So here's an example of Felix doing this. So Felix says, so I'm sure you might be wondering, how much is the tuition for, Felix? I want to know before I book a call. So he proactively brings up the pricing question. And then he says, so I had two options when I started this academy. I could make a self-study course, or I could make a mentoring program where you'd have access to the people that I learned from. So he frames the value proposition before revealing the price. So for that reason, our tuition fee lies somewhere between $4,000 and $14,000 US dollars. And why do I give you such a large range? Because we have a bunch of options. And here he explains the reasoning behind the price range. Maybe you're thinking, Felix, I'm a beginner and new to this. It's a lot of information just now, and I'm not sure I can take this on right now. So he preemptively addresses the beginner objection. Now you can also use their objections to build trust. So when someone says, I've tried this before and it didn't work, most people get defensive. Instead, we say, you're absolutely right. Most service product doesn't work. In fact, here are 3 reasons why. Now this response does something surprising. It agrees with with the objection rather than fighting it. You're validating their experience rather than dismissing it. So first, agree with their experience. You create alignment and you open them to hearing how your approach is genuinely different. So an example is me saying something like, do not over edit your videos at first because it's unsustainable. You are not going to be able to keep up with that. And this is common advice that you hear from YouTube gurus, to do really good editing. And in reality, that's bad advice in most people's situations. So when you use this approach, something fascinating happens with your audience. They sit up straighter, they lean in, they start nodding. Why? Because you're saying what they're thinking. When you validate prospects' concerns and experiences, you create immediate rapport and attention. They think, finally someone gets it. Someone who's not trying to sell me by dismissing my legitimate concerns. Now, another thing you can do is turn questions into wow moments. So an example of this is a question we get all the time: how long until I see results? And our response would be, that's actually the wrong question to ask, and here's why. The timeline isn't what determines success. Let me show you what really matters. So this approach transforms a standard question into an opportunity for insight. So instead of just answering the question, you're elevating the entire conversation. Now, a really easy way to respond to a question like this is to tell a story, either of yourself or one of your clients. An example of this is Felix to the unspoken question, is this too complicated for me? And he responds, when I first learned this, I never looked at the stock chart. I thought it can't be that easy. And honestly, it isn't that easy. There is a crucial piece that's missing here. So he acknowledges the question, but he creates intrigue about his unique approach. And then an example from my channel, when someone asks me if they should use AI voices in their videos, I responded, why do people watch YouTube? Because they want to interact with another human being. That sense of interaction that you get with other human beings is one of the main reasons that people watch. So I elevated the question, right? I didn't answer the question directly. I elevated the conversation and I got deeper into audience psychology, which created a wow moment. And what does this do? It changes how people think about the problem. Hey guys, in the editing process right now for this video, and I just wanted to mention that Go High Level works well for any webinar. So if you're planning to host one, Go High Level will be good for landing pages, appointment setting, etc. So check it out in the description and the pinned comment below. It's basically a software that does everything all in one. So instead of having 7 different softwares, you can just have one software that does everything, and they're all interconnected with each other. And Go High Level has really good 24/7 customer support. So you can literally just log into a Zoom call with somebody and they'll help you right away. So definitely check it out. Instead of spending like thousands of dollars on a bunch of different tools, you can get Go High Level for $97. And there's a special promo with the link in the description and the pinned comment below. Now back to the video. All right, now let's talk about the tech setup for a flawless professional delivery. Now you really don't need fancy camera or professional lighting. Heck, you can literally just use a regular iPhone, or you can just use the webcam on your computer. But the reality is smartphones have some incredible cameras. Like the iPhone 15 and above are insanely good. But to make this simple, I have a minimum viable checklist. When it comes to video quality, 1080p minimum resolution, good lighting, and clean minimalist background, okay? Make sure your background doesn't have your bed in it, like a messy bed, but also make sure your background isn't too distracting. Like there's not a bunch of lights that are, changing colors or something like that in the background. And then make sure that you have 1080p minimum resolution, so that they can see you clearly and they can also see your screen clearly. Because a lot of people are gonna be watching on their TVs. Then this is the one part that's actually quite important, and that is make sure that your audio is good. People might forgive you for mediocre video quality, even bad video quality sometimes, but they will not forgive you for bad audio quality. So make sure that your audio is good. Now, easiest way to do this is to just simply have like a headset on whenever you're doing your webinar, right? A headset that has good audio quality, and then you're just talking to them and it's almost like they're talking to you through a Zoom conversation. And then internet stability, right? Hardwire your connection if possible, have an extra hotspot ready just in case the internet goes out, and make sure you test everything the day before, and then maybe 15-20 minutes before you launch the webinar. And I call this the 15-minute fail-safe checklist, okay? And this is something we do every single time before we do a webinar. We do a quick internet speed test, we do a live test, make sure the audio's good, the video's good, so you have somebody on the other side that's listening to what you sound like, on the other side, like in a different house, and they're basically listening to and watching the webinar. Then you also do a phone view check, because a lot of people are gonna be watching it on their phone. And then you do a final slide check just to make sure the slides aren't messed up. And then have what I call the backup system. And this is where you have a backup internet. Usually a phone hotspot is good enough, and make sure that your internet will automatically switch over to your backup if something happens to it. Now, one thing I want to touch on is we like to send people from the webinar to a phone call. And this is usually some type of demo call or strategy session. And we do like to actually give them value in this session. With that being said, some people are so good at webinars that they can sell high ticket products directly on the webinar itself. Now that's more advanced. You need to be really, really good at webinars if you do that. And I found that most people have much more success sending people to a strategy session or a demo call. And that's a topic for a different video, but of course you can use something like Calendly for that. And also, good old Go High Level does have an integration where you can actually take the calls and schedule your calendar directly on Go High Level. Now, when it comes to when you do the webinar, we found that Tuesdays in the evening are best. With that being said, it depends on your clients, right? If they're business owners, you can do the webinar in a lot of different times, right? Even during the day is fine. If they have a 9 to 5 job, you likely are going to have to do it in the evening right after they get off work. And Tuesday evenings in the US are good. Now, keep in mind, most of your clients, I'm guessing, are probably going to come from the US. Some of them might also come from Europe. So keep in mind what time it is for them in the different places. So if you're doing the webinar at 8 o'clock in New York, that means it's going to be 5 o'clock in California. And then another thing that I briefly want to mention is analyzing webinar performance for continuous improvement. This is where you look at the comments, you look at where people dropped off, you look at how long people actually attended the webinar for, how many people showed up to the webinar, et cetera, and then you figure out what you can improve in order to make those numbers go up. So just as an example of what you can do here, you could split test 2 different headlines on your landing page and then see what percentage of people actually gave their information to receive the webinar info. And then out of those people who gave the information, how many of them actually showed up? And then out of those people who showed up, how many of them actually bought? And if you have a webinar that doesn't do very well, you can go back and watch it and see, maybe you were really flat in the intro, or maybe the title of the webinar didn't appeal to people as much, or something like that, because you might notice that a lot of people dropped off at the very beginning. So guys, like I said, check out all the resources in the description and the pinned comment below. We've got lots of amazing stuff in there for you that is supplementary to this video and will help you. We also have lots of behind the scenes stuff from our exact webinars that have proven to be successful. And if you're wondering about how you can promote people to actually attend your webinar, well, YouTube is great for that. And I made a video talking about how I got my YouTube channel to 6 figures a month, and you can check that video out by clicking right here.